Good morning, everybody, and welcome. Our speaker today is Professor Edwin Bryant, Professor of Hindu Religion and Philosophy at Rutgers, where he teaches courses on Hindu philosophy and religion. His previous talks here have proven to be some of the most popular talks we have on YouTube, and we're very happy to welcome him back. Professor Bryant received his Ph.D. in Indic languages and cultures from Columbia University, where his thesis culminated in his first book, The Quest for the Origins of Vedic Culture. Before coming to Rutgers, he taught Hinduism at Harvard University for 3 years. He has published 8 books and authored a number of articles on Vedic history and culture, yoga, philosophy, and the Krishna tradition, and has received numerous awards and fellowships. As a personal practitioner of bhakti yoga for over 45 years, a number of them spent in India studying with traditional teachers, where he returns yearly, Professor Bryant strives to combine academic scholarship with appreciation towards traditional knowledge systems. His translation of and commentary on the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali is specifically dedicated to contributing to the growing body of literature on yoga. His sequel to this book, entitled Bhakti Yoga, Tales and Teachings from the Bhagavata Purana, also seeks to ground the practices of bhakti in the traditional Krishna-centered framework of the Vrindavan devotional traditions. The professor is presently working on a translation of the Bhagavad Gita with a commentary based on the insights of the principal traditional commentators. That's to say, in the same vein as the Yoga Sutras commentary. He's also co-authoring a book entitled In Defense of God with Form, and working with his sister on translating his Penguin translation of the 10th book of the Bhagavata Purana into Italian, their mother language. The subject of his talk today is Sacred Sound from Vedic Om to Krishna Kirtan. We are very happy to welcome him back, and he will be taking questions at the end. Thank you very much.
So sacred sound, in this sort of vast cluster of constellations that we call Hinduism, there are various things that you can sort of connect everything together with, despite the variegatedness of all the different traditions and practices and theologies. But probably the most fundamental, perhaps, is sacred sound, which, as you know, has its origins in the oldest text, the Rig Veda. And there we find, of course, the Vedic ritualism is basically perfect enunciation of the Vedic hymns. Has to be perfect. Can't go up when it's supposed to go down. If there's anything, it's like pressing the wrong key on a computer. You press the wrong key, you might lose your whole document, whole thing, gone in the old days before backup. Do you remember? 20 years ago, you hit you lost your whole document. So the Vedic hymns were so precisely chanted, right? And if you went up, down instead of up, and you were on day 5 of the sacrifice, and you made one wrong, and you went up instead of down, you had to go back and start the whole thing again. Oh, finished. Useless. It's like losing your document. And actually, by the way, that's one reason why the Indian traditions were memorized in such an unparalleled way in the ancient world, because you had to memorize the hymns so precisely. You forget about skipping a word or a sentence or a page. You couldn't skip one phoneme. So that lended itself to this amazing power of memorization, but based upon sound. So in the Vedic idea is that if basically the Vedic sacrifice perpetuated the universe. It was part of what perpetuated the cosmos. You had to do your Vedic rituals every morning, and you had to chant them precisely, everything precisely right. And if the Brahmins did that, then there would be well-being in the universe. So there's a connection between sound precisely uttered and metaphysics and cosmology. And it's something I think, it's interesting to explore. Because after all, creation is vibration, right? Any kind of movement is vibration. And sound is vibration. So before we sort of stick our nose up at sort of, ritualism, Vedic ritualism, and say, well, it's a, mythic chapter of the past, I think it deserves a little bit of attention. There may have been technologies, we don't know. It's not, let's put it this way, what philosophers would say, it's not philosophically impossible. All we can say is, well, we don't see people chanting mantras and making it rain today. Well, we can say that, and that's fine. But we really don't know what, for a culture so intellectually rigorous and rich, to be perpetuating Vedic ritualism in academic time, according to the dates academics give, which are much, much less than the tradition would offer, for Vedic ritualism to be ongoing for 2 millennia, they're not stupid. Brahmins, at some point someone's going to say, excuse me, Swamiji, it's not working. I paid you some dakshin and you chanted, you did your ritual and it was supposed to rain and it didn't rain. We don't really know what was going on 3,500 years ago and what kinds of mantric shaktis there might have been. I'm just throwing that out there. I'm going to be provocative. So that's that culture which was so much based on sound in the earliest period, the correct recitation. In fact, Vedic science emerges from the Vedic culture. Astronomy emerges, mathematics emerges, right? Because you have to have the ritual has to be exactly, the sacrifice has to be, the famous claim that the Indians knew the Pythagoras, theorem before Pythagoras. That is actually true, but that came out of the context of the Vedic ritual. You had the sacrifice itself had to be precisely formed. Everything had to be precise. There was just so much attention to details. So astronomy emerges from that because your rites have to be performed exactly the right time. Mathematics, phonetics, grammar. The famous Panini grammar, where did that come from? It came from the necessity of basically chanting these Vedic hymns. So there and this Vedic sacrifice revolved around the mantras, the sound, the sacred sound. So we don't know what any of that means. We've lost touch with that millennia ago. Already, what was his name? The first commentator on the Vedas. I forget. Already he's saying, centuries and centuries ago, that nobody knows what soma is. Nobody knows what, how these mantras work. So anyway, let's keep our eye on the ball. So mantra. Now that, as the sort of, the Purva Mimamsa part of the old Vedic mentality, sort of, I don't know if we could say evolve. That would be an academic way of thinking, that things evolve, right? The traditional way, of course, is that these things are eternal. So, we'll jump backwards and forwards between academic ways of thinking, which is chronological. So the old Vedic culture sort of develops into the Upanishadic Vedanta culture. But, the tradition, of course, would say they wouldn't look at it that way. They would consider these truths to be aparushaya, so eternal. So we don't have to take sides. We'll just be aware of the different ways of understanding this material. But by the time you get to... So Om, then, is central to the mantras that are chanted in the Vedic period. It's central to that, too. And there's a correlation with Om and Brahman, but Brahman means something a little bit different in the early Vedas. All of these terms evolve in different contexts. So the term Om, Brahman, Dharma, these all had ritualistic associations in the early texts, like the Brahmana texts. Let's fast forward, by the time we get to the Upanishads then, we have a very, very clear correlation between Om and Brahman. That all this, Sarvamidam Kalu Brahman, all this is Brahman, and Brahman is Om. And Om is the Atman. And probably you've read the Mandukya, nice short little Upanishad. And so you have the four phonemes of Om, right? Correlated with the four states of consciousness, the waking, right? There's four things consciousness can do. Not that consciousness does anything, but there's four things that, let's put it this way. There's four things that consciousness can be conscious of, because consciousness is actually passive. It can be conscious of the external world in wakeful state. It can be conscious of dream, which is basically samskaras, imprints in the mind, right? In waking state, all of our sense impressions, they get imprinted in the mind, they become samskaras. So in dream, the samskaras is sort of jumbled together in seemingly random ways, and we call that dream. And then we have the state of deep sleep, which Shankara likes to correlate with an experience of Brahman. We were just reading on Friday about the correlation of deep sleep. Sankhya wouldn't say it that way. Sankhya would say consciousness is absorbed in tamas. But it's a third kind of thing that consciousness can be conscious of. It can be conscious of the external world, conscious of the samskaras and the chitta, conscious when the chitta is completely covered by tamas. It's absorbed in tamas, according to Sankhya. According to Shankara, actually, the Atman is kind of disconnected from its psychophysical nature and actually has an experience of Brahman. But not everybody would agree. That doesn't matter. And then the fourth, the Turiya, which is consciousness conscious of itself. It can never not be conscious, my friends. There's no such thing as not being conscious. So the fourth state, called Turiya, in the Upanishads, and Chaturthi by Patanjali, the fourth state. You don't even want to name it. Can't name it because names are connected with forms and things in Prakriti. So this is beyond that. And so to underscore that point, it's just called the fourth. Because if you label it, a label is going to be a mental construct, and a mental construct, a samskara, which ultimately comes from something in Prakriti, and that which is inappropriate for. So the Mandukya then, that this Om is Brahman, is the Atman, and it ends by saying, one who knows this, one who knows Om, and knows that the Om is Atman, such a person knows the Atman through the Atman. Meaning if you chant Om, which is the Atman, then that Om, and in fact elsewhere in the Upanishads it says Om is like the arrow. You're all familiar with this. I know you have a good study program here on the Upanishads. So Om is like the arrow, and Brahman is the target. So in this way, the sacred sound that in the earlier period is associated with the mantras that perpetuate cosmic well-being and can enact change. You can make it rain. You can actually fulfill your desires by Vedic ritualism in the old period. So that's sort of external, that kind of external connection of, Om being Brahman, being more sort of the external cosmos. In the Upanishads, you get a shift away from the external into the internal world. The sacrifices don't get rejected, but they kind of get relegated. If you've read the Gita, there's some pretty strong language in the Gita, second chapter, right? Yamimam pushpitam vacham pravidyanti am vipaschitaha. They're less intelligent. They're interested in these flowery words of the Vedas. Pretty in your face, pretty strong language. Never rejected. It's never rejected. Vedic sacrifice, there's no statement saying it doesn't work. Maybe amongst a few, the Charvakas or a few marginal voices, but typically, in fact, the Gita assumes it does work. They do work, and the Gita's whole project is, well, you should do it without desire, because in Vedic ritualism, the Mimamsas, the ritualists are going to say only a fool does something without desire. Just like that, only a fool, anvipaschita, something like that, performs an action without a desire. So the Gita is not rejecting the sacrifice per se as the attitude of doing it for some body-mind, avidya, right? Body-mind for some material gain. In fact, later on in the Gita, Krishna it actually supports the whole idea that Anadbhavanti Bhutani, right? The grains come from rains, and rains come from the sacrifice. So elsewhere he supports it. So this is fundamental. I mean, difficult for us to sort of to take it seriously today, because we have different technologies. We inhabit a different kind of cultural, technological kind of society. But 2,000 years is a pretty long time. I think we should be a little cautious, a little wary about just dismissing it all as a mythic past. Maybe we could just think of it as lost technologies. That's another option. But sacred sound then. So in the Upanishads, it gets correlated much more with an internal Brahman. Okay, Brahman is Janmadhyasya Yataha. Sure, it is that from which everything emerges. But there's much more, there's a lot of stress on that Brahman which is within the Atman. And the Mandukya then connects all of that. Numerous verses in the Upanishads correlating Brahman with Om with Atman. And so therefore there's this relation. So Om is, we should be clear about that. Om is Brahman. It's not a sound representation of Brahman. Normal language, if I say, I don't know, that is a drum, I could call it anything. There's no connection between the word drum and the object there. You could call it mridanga, right? If in Bengal they call it a mridanga. You could call it abracadabra. You could call it anything, as long as we all agree. Like from now on, let us change the name of this thing. Let us call it a amagama. And that works just as well. But Om is not like that. It's not socially designated. Whether, everybody agrees on this. Vedanta, yoga, even Sankhya, these different traditions, that Om is eternal. It is Brahman. It is that Brahman in sonic form. It's Brahman manifest in sound. So in one sense, everything is Brahman, fine. But in another sense, that ultimate causal, ultimate Brahman manifests in the sound Om. And so the Upanishads, already in the Upanishads, you have this notion of Om as an alambana, a support of the mind. That when you fix your mind, then you need to fix it on something, right? Even in Jnana Yoga, you have to fix it on the Mahavakyas. You have to fix it on you have to fix it on the imagery, like the golden person in the sun, the Vidyas. So you have to fix the mind on something. And throughout Indian history, Om comes massively, highly, highly recommended. So there we have it in the Upanishads, the sacred sound, connected with Brahman, connected with Om, and connected with Ishvara. Now that connection with Ishvara, maybe the Yoga Sutras is a great place where this becomes highlighted, because in the Yoga Sutras, how do you get this experience of the drashtra, the seer? Ishvara Pranidanad, from surrender to Ishvara. Bhakti. Sort of very minimalistic bhakti. But there it is. And tasya vachakaha pranavaha. Patanjali says that Ishvara is manifest, tasya vachakaha, his sound manifestation. He manifests, okay? It's not a symbol. Normal language is symbolic. Something symbolizes something else. The word drum symbolizes something different from that sound. Drum, right? That vibration of air, drum, is different from the physical object there. That is not so with Om. That sound Om is Brahman, not a symbol of Brahman. You can't change it. And it is Ishvara. Patanjali tells us, tasya vachakaha pranavaha, that's another word for Om, pranavaha, from the root pranu, to emanate forth, right? Janmadhyasya yataha, emanation of creation. So if creation is Brahman, is the emanation of creation, and all this is Om, then that's emanating forth, and that's what pranava means, pranu, from the Sanskrit root, pranu, to issue forth. So in Patanjali we get this correlation that with Ishvara and Om, right? So now we got all these correlations. We got Brahman is Om, Ishvara is Om. It's all one and the same entity. And what do you do with this Om? In Patanjali, tad japa, tadartha bhavanam, that you do japa. And japa is the quiet. Jap means to say something quietly. And another word that goes back to the Vedic hymns, right? The Brahmins would chant the hymns very quietly. That was called japa. All of these words that we're familiar with in later Hinduism, they all have their roots in the Vedic culture, where they mean slightly, where their meanings are associated. They have some connection with Vedic ritualism. So jap in the earlier period meant the Brahmins reciting their mantras quietly. So, yeah, not too loud, especially if you've got neighbors, if you're living in New York City. Well, japa's okay. Japa. You don't want to invite Kalpa to do Kirtan if you're, living on the second floor. Well, you might. You just liberate the whole building, Kalpa. Let's do it, man. Let's do it. Let's liberate everybody. So, japa that's the difference between japa and Kirtan. So, japa is to say something quietly, and it's your personal meditation. So that's then Ishvara manifests Ishvara is not manifests. Okay, we could say that maybe. Ishvara manifests in that sound. Fine, so meditation is the quiet repetition of that sound Om, and fixing the mind on it, because then the mind is fixed on Brahman, which is ultimately Atman. So the mind becomes settled, but not just settled on any useless thing, like a candle, right? But it's actually such, you get two for the price of one. Actually, Patanjali goes on to say, you know what, you can fix your mind on anything you want. Yata abhimata, according to your abhimata, your wish, But he clearly stresses Om, because why do you get two for the price of one? If you use another object to fix your mind, like I could fix my mind on that, right? And just try to have a steady stream of thought fixed on this thing, then it's all about me and my willpower, my ego. Whereas it's all right. So, but it serves as a support for the mind. Patanjali accepts that. Fair enough. You have a problem with Om, don't like Ishvara, don't like God. All right. Somebody bashed you about in Catholic school. Okay, you got a dvesha, you got some animosity against Ishvara. Fair enough. Then meditate on a candle. Then actually, that's not a good thing because it flickers. Meditate on anything you want, but you meditate on Om. It serves as an alambana, a support for the mind, and it's divine presence, so you get grace. Later on, Patanjali is going to say, Samadhi siddhir Ishvara pranidhanad. From Ishvara can just give it to you. As Krishna keeps saying in the Gita, he says it several times. In the 18th chapter, he says it three times in the space of about half a dozen verses. By my grace, by my grace, by my grace. So this is bhakti. So, in the traditions where the bhakti element, where bhakti is deeper and stronger, the bhaktas are not going to be satisfied with just this generic Brahman. What is Brahman? What does the Vedanta Sutra tell us about Brahman? Very little, my friends. It says, Janma adi asya yataha. From Brahman, of this, creation, etc. So from Brahman comes creation. Okay. I mean, anybody could say something like that. A Big Bang theorist could say something like that. That's not very specific, is it? But then in Sutra 1.5, it says, Ikshater, that it is intelligent. That's all it says. So if somebody wants a little bit more than that, if you have a bhakti heart, if for your jnani, it's not so important. The jnani, you want to throw everything out. It's all a party, get rid of everything, and just, nirodha everything, or just sort of deconstruct everything, eliminate everything, and you have an experience of infinite, ananta, jnana, infinite, as the Taittiriya says, ananta satyam jnanam. You have an experience of infinite satyam, truth, which is jnanam, which in this case means consciousness. So that's an option. But those who have a bhakta's heart, who feel that there must be something greater than the Atman, something, a Paramatman, if you will, a Purushottamaha. And of course, we had a lecture already on this sort of how Ishvara and Bhagavan are understood differently in the different Vedanta traditions, so we don't need to revisit that. But those who seek a deeper understanding and experience and relationship with this intelligence, which is all the Vedanta is going to give you, it's intelligent, right? That's not a great, you want to do puja and you want to do kirtan to what? Unintelligence. Well, that's a little bit skimpy, isn't it? So you're not going to get overwhelmed with bhav and roll around on the floor like the great Ramakrishna did, just, offering your mind to unintelligence. So, so for those then who wish to excavate this Brahman, given it's okay, fine, it's the source of creation and it's intelligent, fine. It's just intelligent design. Okay, basic 101 theism. That's basic 101 theism. That's like minimalistic theism. What is the most minimal expression of theism in any culture, in any intellectual tradition, is that there is intelligence behind the universe, which is fine. But the Indian devotional traditions, the bhakti traditions, go much further than that. So those then who seek a deeper understanding of this Om. Om is a seed. By definition, it's a beach. Well, what does that mean? What happens if you plant an apple seed? You get an apple tree, which is a lot richer and more visual, and it has fruits and flowers which are much more sensually available. So if Om is a seed, well, what happens if you plant it then? What happens if you plant it and you nourish it with bhakti lata bij? Well, then that seed will manifest in the wonderful, multifarious ways that the Indian bhakti traditions have understood, that God must be infinite, Ishvara must be infinite, must be an infinity of forms. Must be. You can't just have one form, because that's a limitation, right? There must be an infinity of forms. And we know a few of them, Shiva, Vishnu, Narayana, but then Ganesh, there must be an infinity of forms. So these forms then, when bhakti arises in the heart, in other words, bhakti towards something greater than oneself. And it might start off with, there's got to be something up there. There's got to be something greater than me that's intelligent. The Vedanta says that. Ikshater, yeah, thinks, fine. But when that drive to connect, to understand, and when one realizes one's utter helplessness in figuring things out by yourself, in breaking through Maya, my friends, with all our big Vedanta and all our big knowledge and our Sanskrit and our professor this and that, it's all nonsense. It's all nonsense. We can't break through Maya that way. So when we realize that, and then we seek a deeper relationship with this being, so then that Om starts to manifest presence. And the Indian tradition, somehow or other, and it's causeless. It has to be causeless. Ishvara enters into one's life. Why does it have to be causeless? Because if there's a cause, it means that Ishvara is controlled by that cause. Do you see? If you say, I will encounter Ishvara by my yogic prowess and my great study of Vedanta and my great sort of chitta-vritti, narodaha virtuosity, then an Ishvara now, Ishvara is constrained to appear. Well, you've just limited the unlimited one. So there can be no cause. This is the meaning of causeless. Ahetuki. We cannot understand how it is that we encounter the form of the Ishvara that will steal our hearts. Because that's what bhakti is. Bhakti is when our humility and our depth of our intense desire to know more and recognition of our own utter inability to figure anything out, despite our posturing, and our willingness from that's honesty, to recognize we know nothing and can do nothing with our own prowess to break through this Maya, right? Devi hi yasha guna mayi mama Maya, says Krishna, duratyaya, very hard to, impossible to overcome. Mameva ye prapadyante, but if you surrender to me, Maya metam taranti, then you can cross over. So when that becomes obvious, and my own spiritual journey started with very, very vivid, in this place, very vivid sense of of helplessness and the fact that there was some higher being. Then Ishvara enters into our lives. And in the Indian tradition, you have this wonderful plethora. You have so many forms of even just Shiva. You have unlimited types of Shiva. You know, village Shiva is going to be very different from the Shvetashvatara, Rudra, right? So even a deity can have infinite forms. Vishnu, Narayana, Ganesh, Krishna. Even within the Krishna tradition, you have different Krishnas. You have Radha Krishna, you have baby Gopal Krishna. So even within a tradition, you have a variety of presences, divine presences. And if all we need to do is be humble, recognize how pathetic we are, in terms of trying to break free of our upadhis and our kleshas and our maya and our vidya, and surrender. And then Ishvara comes. He might come in the form of a teacher, he might come in the form of a shastra, something will happen. And our hearts will be captured. Now, when that takes place, remember what we're talking about. We're talking about sound. Keep our eye on the ball. Then that Om is not really going to be very satisfying. Because Om is impersonal. Om is just that Brahman which is intelligent. It's not, it's not going to arouse bhakti. We're not going to go rolling around the floor with tears gushing out of our eyes and our hair standing on end, worshipping an intelligence, like I said. So at that point then, that seed begins to manifest its particular nature. And it becomes Om Namo Shivaya. Om Namo Narayanaya. You notice the Om is kept. Because the Om is the seed, right? If apple tree, the seed is still there somewhere, right? In the ground. Okay, it's now become a big tree, but whatever remnants of the seed are still going to be there. So the Om is still there, but it's now manifesting a much richer, much fuller presence. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So you'll notice that the Om is retained, except in the Hare Krishna mantra. And then, of course, the theologians have to scramble and they'll say, well, it actually resonates within it. So, but the idea being, everybody recognized the fact that they have to theologize that and come up with a word. Where's the Om in the Hare Krishna mantra? Well, it resonates within it. The fact that they have to theologize that indicates the centrality of Om. And that sort of united the Indian traditions. So there we have it. So therefore, this is recommended in all of the Shastra. This is non-sectarian. Even Buddhists have their Om. They have mantras with Om, and the Jains. So this really is a connector of the moksha traditions of India. Okay, so sacred sound, mantra, and with this mantra then you can japa it, and I want to read just 3 verses, and I said I wasn't going to talk too long, and there I am. Where was it going with that? Okay. Yeah, 3 verses from the Shikshastakam, but I was going to say something else. It'll come. After the age of 65, you can have as many senior moments as you want, as many kind of, as long as we don't forget our mantras, my friends. 80 years old and all, and if we forget the mantra, then I don't know. There's no hope. Okay, so now, Patanjali hints at this when he says that japa. Tasya vachaka pranavaha tajapa tadartha bhavanam. He says, you do the japa of this Om, but then he says tadartha bhavanam. The commentators don't say very much about this. What does this mean? Tadartha bhavanam, being aware of its meaning. Artha. Artha can mean different things. Here it means meaning. Bhavana means to sort of be aware of, to have mentally understand something. So he says this interesting thing. Tajapa, right? He says, Ishvara, tasya vachaka pranavaha. So Ishvara can give you samadhi. And how does he do that? Well, tasya vachaka pranava. He comes as Om, right? And what's that? How does that help? Well, japa. You do japa, right? Remember, japa is chitta vritti nirodha practice. Yoga, Patanjali yoga. What is yoga? Chitta vritti nirodha, the complete and utter stilling of the mind. That's Patanjalian yoga, not bhakti, not jnana. But Patanjalian yoga is chitta vritti nirodha. So How do you chitta vritti nirodha on Ishvara? Through the sound Om. So you chitta vritti. So it's very different from puja, which is an active mind, or reading the Bhagavata stories, active, kirtan, active. There's mostly bhaktis are very active, very, very beautiful, aesthetically beautiful. Why is it aesthetically beautiful? Indian culture comes from bhakti, by the way, not jnana. Jnana, you'd be sitting in a cave. That would be your aesthetics, right? The wall of a cave. So aesthetics in India comes from bhakti. Why? Because you're offering your best to Bhagavan. You're offering so you develop exquisite forms of music, exquisite forms of art, exquisite culinary traditions, like in Jagannath Puri, 56 offering, right? 56 offering a day. Why 56? Well, because God is infinite and you're not. So the best you can do is 56. But you're pointing in the best of your abilities, you're pointing towards infinity with your meager little 56 offerings. And by the way, an offering's got about 35 preps on it. So all of this aesthetic culture comes out of bhakti, offering to Bhagavan. So japa then, fixing the mind, two forms of practice which have survived to our day and age. Right, and you'll see Kalpa, he's going to come up, and it's going to be the same mantra, but you're going to have a couple of instruments that maybe you didn't find in India. What's wrong with that? After all, Oriental Kirtan is different from South Indian Kirtan. It's going to be much more formal, Vedic, and beautiful in its own way. It's going to be different from Gujarati Kirtan. What do you think? It's going to come in the West? There's going to be Western instrumentation. So, and it's spreading actually in the West. Kind of it's piggybacking on the yoga culture. Now many yoga studios are having they're kirtans. So a certain percentage of people are becoming interested in kirtan. So I'd like to just finish up with three beautiful verses from the Shikshashtakam, the 8 verses. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, probably in Indian tradition, there have been many amazing beings of different stripes and shades, and the being that I think it's, most would agree, I don't think it's a sectarian thing to say, that is most vividly associated with ecstatic kirtan is Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in the 16th century. So he only wrote 8 verses, but his disciples produced a massive, massive, massive canon, which is now more and more being translated and made available. Rasa Bhakti, all about the Rasa Bhakti, Vraj Bhakti, that tradition of having developing different flavors of love. I mean, that gets so theologized in such a sophisticated way, drawing from the entire gamut of Indian 2,000 years of Indian intellectuality, gets channeled in the work of his disciples in theologizing this, what is ultimately at its core simply pure love, unconditional love for God, unconditioned, no conditions. Patanjali is conditional love. Jiva calls it jnana mishrita. He wouldn't consider it real bhakti. If you're worshipping Ishvara to get moksha, that's not real bhakti, according to the Vraj traditions, because you're asking for something. If you approach Ishvara they have karma mishrita, jnana mishrita. Karma mishrita is you're asking for material things, which is 95% of world theism. You go to your churches and your mosques and your mandir, and it's what I call gimme religion. But there's a higher type of theism, which is asking for moksha, but it's not pure, right? Because you're not interested in Ishvara per se, as Ishvara. You want to get something. Okay, liberation is a very lofty, noble thing, no question. So pure bhakti, where you are just enamored of your beloved, and you don't care if you stay in samsara forever. That's the test. That's the test. You don't care. Let me take birth after birth after birth. Okay, so Chaitanya wrote 8 verses, and I wanted to share 3 of them related to our topic today. And he starts off, glory to the Sri Krishna Samkirtana. So Samkirtana means some, together. And Kirtan is the loud expression of this divine name, which is with its roots way back in the Vedas, right? So when you're doing it together, which is what we're going to do. It's called, well, this is Kirtana, Samkirtana, same thing actually, there's no difference. Which cleanses the heart of all the dust accumulated for years. In classic yoga language, that will be the kleshas, the anartas, the upadis, right? Different traditions are going to have different vocabulary, different terminologies. So here is called dust, the dust of the mind, right? Which covers our real natures as pure Atmans. And in the Vaishnava traditions, we're pure, not just pure Atmans, but we're eternal Ankshas, we're eternal lovers of God in our ultimate core. This is the Vaishnava traditions. It extinguishes the fire of conditional life, right? This fire, which is really desire, it's raga, it's desire, kama esha, right? Krodha esha. So this desire that just like a demon in our heads, like demons in our heads, these desires, they relentlessly put pressure on us, don't they? With all our jnana, with all our knowledge, we still are tormented by these desires. It could be sattvic desires. They don't have to. So the Sankirtan extinguishes that, and it's because of desire. Then there's samsara. So the Sankirtan movement is the prime benediction for humanity at large, because it spreads the rays of the benediction moon. It's a little poetic, right? So the idea that Sankirtan is the process for our day and age, the chanting, my friends. The chanting and surrendering the mind to Ishvara in the form of sound. It is so easy. It is, anyone can do it. You don't have to be a Vedantin. And don't think there's not amazing theology underpinning it. Each tradition has its theologians. Just like Christianity has its amazing theologians like Augustine and Aquinas and the early church fathers. You don't mess with them. And still today, right here in my university, Brian Leftow, medieval specialist in Anselm. I'm brilliant. They lured him away from Oxford. Christian theologian. So these traditions, they may seem simplistic on the surface, but don't think if you want theology, if you want philosophy, you got it right there. But so it's easy, not everybody wants to spend a lifetime studying Vedanta, so Kirtan, Sankirtan, everybody gets the benefit. Vedanta just makes you proud, my friends. In all cases, you'd be very wary of knowledge, because then you start to identify it's just another upadi. Unless you're very careful and very pure, people look up to you, respect you. It's just another trap. All right. So it increases the ocean of transcendental bliss, and here's a nice line. It enables us to fully taste the nectar for which we are always anxious. We're all seeking nectar. We seek bliss, whether it's through our families, through our whatever gratification we indulge in. We seek bliss, and that bliss is to be found in the names of Bhagavan. This is the claim. That has been handed down for 2,000 years. And not just, if it was just one tradition, you could say, well, that's sectarian. But all the traditions have said the same thing. Generation after generation after generation after generation of sadhaka, of yogi, of bhakta, of practitioner, they've all confirmed this. That's a pretty substantial body of authority. If you're looking for a meditation practice, take the mantra. What are you going to do? Look at a candle? Or your breath? This has been recommended and by great being after great being. So 2 more verses. Now this one is important. In the second verse, so Chaitanya only wrote 8 things. Chaitanya says, your holy name can render all benediction to living beings. Look at this. And thus you have hundreds and millions of names. There's no need to get sectarian about what name, which mantra. They're all Ishvara. If you start getting a sectarian, you're being offensive. If Ishvara manifests in a variety of names and you're only going to chant this name and everything else is lesser or lower, that's offensive. Here he said, Chaitanya himself says, you have hundreds of millions of names like Krishna and Govinda. In these transcendental names, here's important. You have invested all your transcendental energies. It's not that one mantra, one name is more, not according to this. All the Shakti, all divine presence is there. We don't underscore this enough, I feel, in certain, sometimes. So all your transcendental energies. So whatever your Ishta Devata is, whichever Ishvara has attracted your heart, right? And if you open your heart and invite Ishvara, even if in the beginning you don't know what that means, you just know there's intelligence, right? You just go Ikshater, right? Sutra 5 of the Vedanta. Even if in the beginning you start off in a place of Ikshater, but you open your heart to Ikshater, then Ishvara will come. And then whatever form that will be, you take that name. Because why? Because the name is none different from the form. So if you're attracted, right, if you have a wife and her name is Mary, well, that's her name. You're not going to call her Jane. You get slapped around the face, right? So therefore, once that Ishta Devata, that form of Ishvara has stolen your heart, and it's not coming from you, my friends, it's Ishvara that will steal your heart. Love does not come from you. It's not in your heart. What's in your heart is the ability to be humble, the ability to recognize we know nothing, and the ability to understand there must be something greater than us. The basic 101 obvious things. And then Ishvara will manifest in some form and capture the heart. When that happens, then you take that name of that form, whether it's Om Namo Shivaya, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, or the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, which is my own mantra. So you've invested all your transcendental energies. Not that one name is more powerful than another, not according to Sri Chaitanya. There are not even hard and fast rules for chanting these names. No hard and fast rules you can chant. Vedic ritualism is massively constrained by rules and regulations. Massively. You have to do exactly at the right time, the constellation. You have to be completely pure. You have to be washed. You have to, can't touch anything impure. If you walk into the sacrifice and a low-caste person touches you with his shadow, you have to go and take bath in the Ganga. How about that? This is orthopraxis. This is old school. Nowadays you might say right wing. This is Vedicism, Brahmanism. Bhakti just knocks all that aside. No hard and fast rules for chanting these names, my Lord. Out of kindness, you enable us to easily approach you by your holy names. This is easy, my friends. If you're looking for a spiritual path, if you're sick of just stuck in your mind all the time, lamenting and whining and moaning and getting old, take a name. And just surrender to the name. How hard is that? Just try to fix, get up in the morning a little bit earlier than normal, and before you do anything out, take a shower, use the bathroom, take the shower, and then that's the time for meditation. First thing in the morning. Also, it's in the Brahma Muhurta, that the energy is a little sattvic, and just chant, and just do your best. Start with 15 minutes. How hard is that? Then you can say you have a real spiritual practice. Everything is there. You don't have to do anything else. You don't have to know Sanskrit. You don't have to study Vedanta. These are all they just make you proud, frankly. Trust me, I know all about pride. So, and then finally, here, this is it. Okay, so what is the best way of having an immediate relationship, not after I die, maybe hopefully I wake up somewhere. No, immediate relationship with Bhagavan, no qualifications, doesn't matter who you are, apichat sudaracharo, even the worst socially behaved person, no rules at all, but how do you chant? Right? Anyone can chant, any context, but if you want to actually contact, Ishvara's in the name, but if you actually want to make that connection, to actually have that deep, that experience of Ishvara in the name, then there are conditions. But they're very simple. One should chant the holy name of the Lord in a humble state of mind. That's all. And humble means to completely surrender and no pride, no imagining I'm this, that, and the other. big kirtan person, big this, that, now. Completely humble. And do you know what humility is? It's nothing other than honesty. It's nothing other than honesty. If you pay attention to your own nonsense, to your own patheticness, it's really quite simple. Well, right? You have to be mad to think that you're something or other. Right? You have to be just totally, deranged. So, humble state of mind, number one. What does that mean? Thinking oneself lower than the straw in the street. After all, the straw in the street is grass, and the grass is an Atman. You're no better than the blade of grass. And in some way, you're worse. Because we are humans, and we're not taking advantage of a human form of life. The grass has no choice. It's karmically bound. It's not making any karma. So it's just burning up karma. But we have the human form of life, which is meant to realize the Atman and develop a relationship with Bhagavan. If we don't use it for that, we're worse off. Because at least the grass is just burning it up and eventually will be a human. So lower than the straw in the street. One should be more tolerant than a tree. Think of a tree, doesn't move, dogs urinate on it, you cut it for firewood. Just sahishnuna. Tarorapi sahishnuna. Taro, right? Taru, so Bengali still. Bengali is quite close to Sanskrit in a lot of the vocab. Pranadapi surichena tarorapi sahishnuna. Amanina. Devoid of all sense of false prestige. Mana. Amanina. No pride at all. And one should be ready to offer all respects to others. This is a practice that you need no learning, nothing. You just need honesty and humility. So offering all respects to others, what a beautiful practice. In such a state of mind, okay? Humble state of mind, lower than a straw in the street, more tolerant than a tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige. In such a state of mind, one can chant the holy name of Bhagavan constantly. And Bhagavan will manifest in that sound. Okay? That's all you need. So I think that's a beautiful, and you can download the Shikshastakam from the web, the 8 verses. I'm going to memorize them. I don't know why I haven't so far. I mean, I know 1 or 2 of them. But these are just so powerful. And we have with us today Kalpa, an old friend, who is going to take us to this deep place of bhav, this deep...